See so many leaders in the same room together. And so I had, when Had asked me to come speak, she had wanted me to talk about innovation. And when you think about innovation, it's like one of those magical words of Silicon Valley, right? Everyone wants it, innovation. It's like strategy, disruption, it's all the unicorn, like all these beautiful words in Silicon Valley that have some meaning but no real meaning. And that's why it makes it really hard to actually talk about this, because we just pack so much into this idea of innovation that it's going to be some secret sauce or some magic, but actually it's something wholly different, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So there's a parable in the Bible called the parable of the sower. And it's a farmer who basically casts out seeds to plant them in the ground. And in the Bible, it actually talks about how some of those seeds, and by the way, these seeds are exactly the same, some of them will fall on the path, so they fall on the concrete. And what happens? Birds come along and eat it. Sometimes they'll fall on some rocky grounds, and they'll start to germinate, they'll start to grow, but there's not enough soil and nutrients to actually sustain them, and they wither and die. Or they fall among some thorns, and even though they try to grow, they're choked out by the plants that are already there. And some of those seeds fall on really good soil where there's nurturing, there's nutrients, and magic happens. And what is the difference between those things? It is not the team, it is not the idea, because even the best idea and the best team in the wrong company without the right nurturing is going to die. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. And so we'll talk about it in 3 chapters. So 1 is the environment. Are you creating the right environment for innovation? 2 is, are you pushing back on the systemic challenges that innovation already has? And 3 is, are you setting them up for growth? So starting with the first one is the environment. The best people on the hardest problem. We always have this belief that, the magical thing is you get a team, it gets together, and it's magical, and it gets done, right? But actually, imagine Amazon, how they think about this. So Amazon is really known for their single-threaded owners and these 2 pizza teams. But what you probably don't know is there's probably 50, 100, several hundred of these teams going on at the same time. And what you hear about is the Amazon Primes. You hear about the product page and product catalog, those things that transform the company. What you don't realize is there's dozens and dozens of teams that toil in obscurity there. And they continue to do it because they believe in the overall mission of the company. And the thing is, it's very easy to have survivorship bias. Well, it's really easy to say, well, those 2 teams were going to win, but actually, the team that built the product details page and the product catalog was the same team that competed with eBay to build the auction system, and the auction system that failed at Amazon. Most people don't know that, right? And you think about that. That team that celebrated for actually hacking what became product search, which led all of the Google searches to land on Amazon, the canonical product pages, was the same team that failed to beat eBay. But think about what the world looks like today. And so if you have the right people working on a hard problem, that is the first place to start. But the atomic unit of success is not a single person, it is a team. Often we think, well, we just have one person, we build everything around that person. But if that person is unable to build a team, nothing happens. And so one of the things, if you read Laszlo Bock's book, he talks about Google and what makes a successful team at Google. And he said it's not the teams full of superstars, it's not the teams full of the best people, the subject matter experts, it's not necessarily the homogeneous teams or the heterogeneous teams. It's actually the teams with psychological safety. That means the teams that can look themselves in the eye and say, actually, I think it's time to pivot. Or, hey, this isn't working, maybe we should try something else. Or, you know what, I don't think that this is the right time for this product, let's disband. That is the first thing you need in the environment, is the ability to have the leadership to make those hard decisions and make that call to pivot or change or to disband so that you can do something else. But that's not enough. What you also need is freedom. Often, some executive has some great idea. How many of you have ever, some executive has a great idea and suddenly it's like, you got to do this one thing. But often that idea is just the spark. What it is not a full product. And so one of the things you need to do is give teams the freedom to iterate, to change that idea, to evolve it as they learn more. I remember one day my team came to me and they said, we want to build the ability for people to sell cars on Facebook. And I had started Marketplace, never imagining anyone would actually buy a car in the app. And so I said, that seems like not the greatest idea, but I have a rule, which is I want teams to innovate, and that means not always saying no. In fact, saying yes, even when I'm not sure. They said, but look at this data. 3 out of our top 10 searches are for cars. We think there's something here. And I'm like, great. Why don't you go test it and show it to me? And 3 months later, they shipped the autos product, and now we have an appreciable market share in this industry, and we're transforming how people sell cars to one another. The thing is, this team also went on and said, you know what? We also want to build a product that allows people to rent apartments with each other, because we see the roommate use case is really popular on Facebook. Like, that seems unusual, but okay. And so they signed a bunch of partnerships, and they went out, and now we are one of the biggest rental destinations also in the US. And so the thing about this team is they were willing to go and do a thing that I didn't even know was a good idea, but they were willing to try. And that's what's incredible about a great team. But the part that was the most important is they had the freedom to fail or to try. And in the end, if it didn't work, the question is, what would I have done? Would I have disbanded the team or gotten rid of all of them? Or would I have said, you know what, try something else? Because that matters a lot. That kind of freedom is actually what germinates and allows teams to have the breathing room to actually build and grow. The third thing is you get more of what you reward. So how many of you have ever worked at a company where they promote the person with the biggest team? Right? I have. And what do you think happens? People then empire builds, right? So I remember one day my head of product and head of engineering said, we actually want to give up this giant product we run, this massive team, and go start something new. I was shocked because they gave up a product that was working to go start what is now Marketplace. They said we would give up a massive team that's working, that we can iterate on, and we are running to do something that we know has a very low probability of necessarily success in the short term. And for 2 years, they worked on this product, and it wasn't working. But they never once regretted making that decision. Because the thing is, what you celebrate, what you talk about, what is the story your company tells about innovation? They talk about the people who run the biggest teams, the people who own the most stuff, or do they say, you know what, this story is about 4 people who changed the trajectory of this company, and then everyone goes, I want to be like them. Because whatever you celebrate, whatever stories you tell in your company and your teams is what you get more of. If you celebrate the hero's journey of 4 people who have a 2-pizza team and that create something that's transformative, you get more people saying, I want to join one of those teams, even if I have to give up this massive team that I run today. But if you say, you know what, in order to get promoted, you need to manage managers, you need to have X number of people, then you get your best people on those sets of problems. And so whatever you choose your carrot to be, you will get more of it. And often I see companies say, well, they're only working on something new. It's probably not worth them. We probably won't put senior people on it. But what if you put somebody who is worthy of doing this and you said, you know what, the reward is you get to have freedom to do something and you get the opportunity to fail, and it's okay. You're going to get more of that. And finally, in the environment, you need the technology to back all of this up. Because there was once I worked at a company where we would decide what we're going to build, we spend 6 months writing the spec, and then 18 months later, the product would show up. And that's how it works, okay? And you had to be right from the start. Because on the other side, by the way, the environment's changing, your competitors are changing, and you just had to bet that on the other side that you made all the right choices in the first 6 months. Think about what it's like to build like that. The risk of making a mistake was so high that everything had to be perfect. I remember at the back of our spec template, we had 14 teams we needed to review things with. And of course, if team number 13 objected to something, you had to do a change request for the first 12 teams. Because again, it had to be perfect before it went out. And that's the challenge. If you don't have the technology to back this up, if you don't allow teams to iterate, then the risks are so high that everything has to be right up front, which means that you're not learning fast enough, and then someone else is actually going to disrupt you. And so you need a technology that allows iteration speed. It allows experimentation. It allows understanding. And without that, you're not going to. You can have the best team and the best rewards, but no one can actually innovate on your platform. And so that environment, those 4 pieces of the environment, are incredibly powerful. But even in the face of having all of those things, if you run into major challenges and you tell teams the wrong thing, you still will not get innovation. And those challenges are often some of the things that we see in our own companies. And I'll share it with you in 3 different quotes. 1, we tried that already, right? How many times have you come up with a great idea and they tell you, well, there's 3 dead bodies on that one, don't try it, right? So I remember when I was working at Facebook, and I said, I think we should do social commerce. So I interviewed with Cheryl in 2009, and I've been there 10 years. And I said, we should build social commerce. And they're like, well, we've already tried that. They had the product called Beacon. We had an integration with Oodle, which, how was that? And we had tried all these things. We had tried gifting. And I said, but this time it's going to be different. And a bunch of people said, but we already tried it. It didn't work. And I said, well, what if we just look at what we learned from that and actually build something different? Because any great product strategy is actually a strategy, a set of tactics, and execution. And if you unpack any product, it could be a flaw in the strategy, it could be a flaw in the tactics, it could be a flaw in the execution. And you don't know which unless you really understand deeply what happened. But often we just say, well, it didn't work, we tried that. I remember when I was building the ad network at Facebook, we were the 4th ad network team, we were the 4th marketplace team. But you know what? What you can is build on the shoulder of giants and actually figure out what they did wrong and do it right this time. And so if you're a company that says, well, we've already tried that, that means that you're never going to innovate because sometimes it wasn't the right time, sometimes it wasn't the right team, sometimes it wasn't the right strategy, and that's okay. I remember at one point I built the games team, and I came back to run it again, and I brought 2 of my PMs over to run the games team, and they said, every time we say something, the engineer's like, we already tried that. We literally can make no headway. And in the end, the team was just so exhausted that we deprecated that team, we moved it to Seattle, and we hired a whole new team except for 1 designer and 1 engineer who moved to Seattle with it. And there they have built some of the most amazing things since. What's interesting is sometimes you just need a change of mindset. There's a growth mindset, and then there's the we've already done that mindset. And if you have the wrong mindset as a company, you're just going to get less innovation. And so it's important that you find fresh eyes and that you bring to the table what's different this time, and that your company is not the company that says, well, we already tried that, and it's not going to work, because some other company will win because you said it wasn't going to work. There's also that's not how it's done here, right? How many of you heard that? Okay, come on. So there are these hard rules and soft rules in every organization. And innovation often is death by 1,000 vetoes. And many of them are pocket vetoes. Right? How many times is it, we call it running the gauntlet, right? So whenever you have an idea, then you pitch your idea, and then they're like, meet with these 3 other teams because they're going to be offended. Or, hey, did you loop in search? Did you loop in product foundation? Did you loop in? And literally, by the time you're done, everybody's like, here's everything wrong with your idea. But vetoes are cheap. Building new things is hard. And that's the problem. In any group of innovators, they're running this gauntlet over and over and over again. And they're not allowed to ship the product until they keep everyone happy. Is that what you want? Or do you say, you know what, we're going to leave space for people to do something that's hard, and even if it hurts a little bit on everybody else, we're going to give it room. We're going to give it oxygen. I remember when I started working on app install ads, so I was asked to work on platform monetization to do ads, and I didn't want to do this because I never worked on ads or mobile, and I had no interest in doing it. We were the first team outside of ads to actually work on ads at Facebook, and we just did it a totally different way. I knew nothing about our ad system. My engineer knew nothing about the ad system, and we said, we're just going to try something that's crazy. We're going to find a group of people, try to figure out what their problems are, and just plumb through the entire ad system and build that thing. At the time, we were a brand ads business, and so everyone's like, what are you trying to do? And I said, we're going to build this thing with SDKs, and we're going to do this like app install thing. And everyone just said, what is this? But the great thing about Facebook is no one is really allowed to say no. That the team said, you know what? Let's figure out how to help you be successful. And as a result of that, we were able to build the first direct response business at the company, which actually transformed us into a direct response company as actually a majority ads business. But what was great was we didn't work on ads. In fact, we weren't even on that team. We were just a team in a different org that said, we're going to try something crazy. And the thing is, how much space is your company allowed to do that? Are you allowing innovation such that a team like us, that seems like a rogue team in most companies, would actually be able to thrive? Or are you choking that out because it doesn't fit into the org structure? Most of you, if I looked at your org structure and you looked at ours, it probably would make no sense. Right? How many of you work in organizations? The org structure makes sense only to the people at the company. Practically all companies are like that. And the challenge, though, is that those org structures actually stifle innovation, because that's not how it's done here. Our team, everyone who does this works over here, everyone who does this works over there. But who actually works in the gray space in between? Because that's where innovation happens. And often we just think that our org structure is perfect, but it's perfect for what you want to do today. And innovation is what you want to do tomorrow. And the problem is you've optimized for a thing that you're shipping the org chart to your customer every day and you don't even know it. And so really giving your team space that's important, and also not allowing the vetoes to wear them down and actually stifle them. The third one is failure is not an option, right? To innovate is to fail. That is how it works. If you put out a bunch of teams, if you have a 90% failure rate, you're doing pretty well, actually. Think about the failure rate of startups, of restaurants. A very, very good success rate is like kind of low double digits, right? But if you create a system where it's like you fail, you leave the company, or you fail, you never get promoted, who is going to choose to work on any of these products? They're going to work on the safe thing, right? The cash cows, the mature businesses. Hey, the joke we have internally is like, you need to make it better to go take a bet than to improve a product 2% every half. Because a lot of people can improve that product 2% every half and get promoted. But if you have no one who's like, I'm going to take this gamble and make this thing that's transforming this industry, you're never going to have that. And so one of the things that we talk about is how do you get people to leave the big, safe place that they're already at and go strike off on their own? What do you need to do? What kind of rewards? Think about your systems and how you actually build that. Because the challenge is if your gravitational pull is do the core, you're going to get way more of that, but then you will never hit escape velocity in any innovation because nobody is going to want to work on it. And so instead, giving teams the room to fail, but to iterate and learn is how you build transformative innovation in the long term. So let's say that you have addressed the environment and you're pushing back on the challenges. How do you teach teams to grow? The first thing is something I told Mark. So I hit my 10th Faceversary, and he asked me, you've built all these amazing products at Facebook over the years. I worked on games and credits. I built a lot of the payment system. I've worked on app install ads. I built part of platform, and then I also worked on the ad network before I started working on Marketplace. And I told him, persistence, grit, and wearing the rest of you down. Because to build new products is to basically do the thing no one else wants to do. And I said, the thing about diversity that matters a lot to me is that there are people in your company that see things that no one else sees. They see opportunities that and you can tell them they're crazy, or you can say, maybe there's something there. Let's listen to them. Innovators seem crazy when they start, and it seems obvious when they're done. And so that's the challenge that we have is, any idea seems nuts until it works, and then everyone's like, well, everyone knew that. But who is the person who went and executed it? And so the question is this, which is, what is your mission? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then figure out what you need to do to solve it. If you have a mission you hold tightly, so the mission I held tightly was I would go to Facebook someday, and I would build social commerce. It took me 5 years of building all those other products I named before I was even given a chance to work on this product. And then when we got to it, it failed for 3 years. It was a slog. And when we first started it, it actually was so bad that at one point they pulled me aside and said, this is going so badly, we may have to cancel this project. And I realized that we had made a mistake, which is our hypothesis was we're going to build on groups commerce. There's all these groups where people are buying and selling. We're going to build commerce on the back of groups commerce. And it just wasn't working because we realized there wasn't any liquidity. You had to join a group to actually see any content. You couldn't search across groups. There was so many things. And so we actually had to change direction, and then we built the Marketplace tab. But the thing was, we pivoted really fast, and then we needed the technology to be able to do it. And so then we used the technology we had, and we actually decided to build on React Native. And we were the first team to decide to use React Native. And I'm an evangelist for React Native, for those of you who don't know. However, our whole team said, we're going to bet our entire product on this thing that's really untested at the time. And this was in early 2016. And in 2 months, we launched the tab to 5 cities. In 5 months, we launched to 5 states. And then 3 months after that, we launched to 5 countries. And it was an incredible effort on so many people's part to actually pull that together. But the thing is, we believed that somehow this was going to work. Our first iteration didn't work. And by the way, when the tab went out, it didn't work either. And then we kept trying and trying. And another 1.5 years after we finished launching the tab, it actually started working. And then we launched it to more places. But the thing was, we believed that the outcome was the right one, that we were going to get this right someday. Our mission is to connect people through commerce, but we did not say this is how. And every time we just kept iterating and iterating and iterating. And we believed enough to say, you know what, we're going to push back on all the obstacles to get there. The thing was, a lot of things happened along the way. At one point, one of the things that happened was Mark said, you know what, I want you to focus on this, and he took away part of the team. And it was personally devastating, and honestly was the best thing he could have done for us. And so often, what seems like a setback can be actually an opportunity. And so when you think about actually building and growing teams, are you focused on the right things? Are they focused on the right mission? Because there's the what and the how. As long as you know what you're building, then you can iterate on the how, and you can iterate on different markets and different segments. But if you're not even sure of the what, if people aren't even sure that you want to do this, then you're going to fail because you're going to cancel it somewhere along the way. You're like, you know what, maybe this isn't working. We shouldn't be doing this at all. But instead, we believe the outcome was that we would have commerce at Facebook, and now it's just a question of, if this is not the right team, maybe it's a different team, maybe it's a different iteration, maybe it's something else. But that belief and persistence is incredibly important, and building that resilience is incredibly important too. The second thing is shipping is data. So how many of you have tried to build the very, very perfect product by designing everything to the T, and it was exactly how you expected when you launched it? Never. And if you have done that, we should talk afterwards, because I like to hear the secret of this. But actually, when you ship product, when they say that no battle plan never succeeds in the face of the enemy, that is exactly what it's like building products. Until your product is out in the world, you do not know what people are doing with it. But the first time you launch a product, you will know whether your baseline is close or you're far, far off. I remember we had a product that had a goal, and our thing is, if it's within 10x, you can change 10x. You cannot change 100x. So we always ship, look at the baseline. If it's within 10x of our goal, we're like, OK, that's good. And a product with great retention, with very few users, will last. A product with great acquisition, but poor retention will die. And so but you need to get out there to see that data. The problem is often people want to keep designing and keep designing and keep designing, and you don't ship the product. You actually have never met the enemy, and your battle plan might be perfect, but actually you're meeting a different enemy than you thought. And so when you build the product, you need to get the teams to ship, to test, to understand, and then to learn. Because all the research in the world can point you in the right direction, but it won't show you how users think about it on a day-to-day basis. The second thing about shipping is success is shipping fast, so you can succeed by failing fast or succeeding fast. Failure is the long slog of not learning anything and not changing the trajectory. And so you can ship something and it sucks. Then you know that's the wrong product. Or it takes off. But actually, the long slog is really hard because the opportunity cost is building up. The pressure on the team is building up over time as well. And so having a way to actually think about what is the time box you're giving this to succeed and fail before you iterate. And if you're iterating fast enough, it actually gives you more opportunity to shoot. And that's important as well. The third thing is focus on learning. We always talk about, basically everyone's like, I want my product to win. But first, when you enter a market, you're actually learning to learn. You don't read your first book by reading Harry Potter. You learn to read by actually learning your letters, then your words, and working your way up. When you build any new product, you need to go out there and learn, understand, do the research. But then as you're iterating, you're learning more and more and more. Often we think, oh yeah, success is lightning in a bottle, right? But actually, the great products are iterating constantly and improving constantly. You're just not seeing it behind the scenes. But a great team focuses on learning. What is the first 6 months? How do we learn as fast as we possibly can so that we can grow in the long term? How do we make sure retention is right so that we can expand on it? Focusing on that learning actually accelerates you in the long term. I always tell teams, be really careful that you're not actually doing a 2-year roadmap 6 months at a time. If you're trying to fly to New York, you can get there a few ways, right? One is you can fly to Phoenix, then fly to Chicago, then fly to Dallas, and fly to New York. Or maybe you plan out the trip, save up a little bit more money, and fly direct. The question is, what are you doing? And so instead, really understanding what you're trying to learn in each of these things. What are you trying to do? How do you learn faster? How do you get more information? And then how do you actually accelerate so your long-term trajectory is successful? And finally, we have this thing we call no sacred cats. So one of our teams actually had this saying, and it's because there's always sacred cows in every company, right? There are things that you can't touch, things that we haven't done this before, or we're not going to do this. And so this team, what they did was every 6 months, or every 3 months, they would actually iterate 10 products, that they were 10 iterations of the product. And 2 or 3 of them would be wild successes. 2 or 3 of them were just a waste of time, and everything was in between. And over the years, this product has lived for the last 7 years, and every year they would revisit some of the old ideas that worked, and then it turns out they no longer work. Or some of the old ideas we discarded actually are working now. And we celebrate with something we call no sacred cats, which is always question your assumptions. So often you kind of get into a rut. You're like, we already tried that. Or, hey, it's not going to work in that country. Or that's the wrong cohort. But maybe you just haven't figured it out. And so teaching yourself to question the assumptions, not revisiting your roadmap all the time, but really saying, OK, what assumptions got us here? And what does that mean for us going forward? And so you having a culture of learning and questioning and constantly pushing will get you better and stronger over time. But if you say, well, we've tried all those things, that roadmap is done, we're just going to keep going in the path we're going, that is a recipe for actually stifling innovation on teams that are already there. And so if you're thinking about innovation, the question is, think about the things I said today and then evaluate your company. If you had to think about, are you creating that fertile ground? Is your environment good? Give yourself points from 1 to 5 in your head. Then add up, how are these challenges feeling at my company? Are there a lot of executives who are like, that's not invented here, or hey, we've already tried that, or we have to get this right, and if you fail, that team is going to be disbanded? Think about the score from 1 to 5, how good your company is. And then finally, think about the iteration speed in the teams that you have. Are you actually able to ship and learn, fail fast? Are you able to actually question assumptions? Are you focused on the what, not just the how? And then assess yourself. Because the thing about innovation, it doesn't happen by accident. The same seeds in different ground will have different results. And true innovation requires nurturing. True innovation requires support. And true innovation requires space. Without any of those things, you won't have that at your company. Thank you very much.
Well, first, great speech. This was really wonderful and inspiring just to think about our own work. But when you think about companies that maybe have opportunities in some of these areas, what do you think as a product leader you can do to change that? Or is the message just like, well, maybe this isn't an innovative company?
I think any company can choose to become an innovative company, but you need somebody in the company who really cares about it. You need a champion, whether it's your chief product officer, whether it's the CEO. Somebody has to say, you know what, we want this. So how many of you seen I've seen all of these companies where they have an innovation team, right? They box all the innovation in this corner and say, those are the people who are innovating, the rest of us are down to the normal business. How successful do you think those companies are? I've met lots of people who work on those innovation teams, and outside of a few companies, many people actually use that as well, you're thinking about leaving the company, want to work on innovation, go over there. Instead of actually giving it oxygen within the teams themselves. Because who knows a product in an area better than the teams that are seeing the problems on the ground every day? But if you say, well, it's over there, we check the innovation box, it's kind of like having a sustainability team, like it's a check of the box sort of thing. But if you're serious about it, you embed it in the everyday culture. Because a lot of these ideas didn't come from some magical innovation team. There were people working on other things that said, you know what, I saw this thing that's adjacent to what we're doing today. How about we go do that? And so if you allow that seed to germinate the places that there already are, they're the ones who actually know what nurturing needs to actually make that product successful. So one of the teams that we had said, you know what, we're going to choose to calve off our team. So rather than the leader actually taking over more teams, he said, I want to split my team in 2. And so when we were working on App Install Ads, he said, I'm going to create the audience network team, which is the ad network team. Then he said, I want to create the groups commerce thing. So he actually would split the teams over and over and over, and he would take the best people from each of the teams and create new teams on it. And that's how we chose to innovate on that team. Another team was like, we keep wanting to add new features, and so that team was a core team, and so they said, we just want to add more features within the core teams. You can do it either way, but it's really the mindset of the leaders that matters the most, which is, are you giving space? Are you rewarding the things that you care about? And are you getting more of it? Or are you actually stifling it with all the small choices you're making?
Hey, thanks for that. So the piece that I love about what you talked about is being focused on the goal and the outcome and then iterating till you get there. How do you balance that with the need to have a roadmap for 12 months when you have no idea what's actually going to work? And how do you get buy-in around that?
So the thing about a roadmap and a product strategy is it should be a living document. It's really important that as you learn, you're adapting. If you just say, hey, here's a hard roadmap, and we're just going to stick to it, come hell or high water, then what if you find out that there's some industry disruption or the customers were different than you thought? What if your first customers you're succeeding in are not the people you're going after and you need to pivot? And so instead, I ask the product teams to constantly keep revisiting. don't revisit constantly every single week, but have checkpoints. So we do a midpoint checkpoint in every half and say, are you going in the right direction, or are you actually needing to make adjustments? Because the challenge is if you just keep driving straight down the highway, sometimes you need to do something else, and if you don't make those adjustments, you're actually going to end up in the wrong place. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you inviting us here. Thank you.